Rob Neely, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
50 years in business,
Yeah.
in entrepreneurial land. Off air, you talked to me about your first sort of experience in that space. Take me through that as a kid growing up in Melbourne.
Look, you don't know you're going to be an entrepreneur until you know. And I clearly say to people I speak to all around the world, you can't teach being an entrepreneur. It is innate. It's in you or it's not. My wonderful varied life started 50 years ago this year when I was 15 years old, and I went and raised $35. I called it a seed round from mum and dad for $35. And my idea at the old age of 15 years of age was I was pretty sure I could buy surfboards in the middle of winter and basically flip them in summer for double the price. So in other words, back in the mid-70s in Melbourne, this was. Of course, middle of winter, it's freezing and the kids don't want their surfboards. They're thinking about other things. And my view was I saw some mates selling their boards for half what they paid for them previously. My view was to flip it the other way. So I went to mum and dad and said, I can still remember it. They were still both in bed on a Sunday morning. I said, could you lend me $35? And look, $35 back then was a lot of money. You could buy 3 pairs of Levi's for $35 back then. So put it in perspective. And I pitched them my idea, which was I wanted to buy surfboards and clean them up and sell them, and I could double the value of them. And of course that actually worked. And so for the next 3 years until I was 18 and going to university, we bought and sold surfboards, hundreds and hundreds of them. But ultimately we ended up in 1978 at Christmas time, and we had 105 surfboards in mum and dad's backyard, all laid out, all priced in certain sections. And back then, the only way to sell anything, secondhand goods, was through classified ads, either through the large newspaper or something called Trading Post, which would be akin to a printed version of Facebook Marketplace today. You know, we would put an ad in each, and it would come out every Thursday, the Trading Post, and people would then ring you up to find your address, and they'd come around. But I think the last week before Christmas in '78, we had 105 there, and we sold the whole lot bar one. I think one surfboard was left at Christmas Eve, and that was enough, believe it or not, for me to buy my first house.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is an amazing story.
It's astonishing. But that was back when houses, you could buy a brand new house in a new allotment for $25,000, $30,000, something like that.
Certainly the ratio between earning income and housing affordability was.
Yeah, and that was my entry to being an entrepreneur. I didn't know it, but mum and dad were business people.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the innate position I'm interested in. How much do you think it is your environment growing up and seeing that in your parents versus it actually being within your DNA?
Yeah, I think it's a mixture of both. Certainly from my perspective, it's a mixture of both.
What did your parents do?
Mum and dad were in small business, so they had coffee shops, or what we call now espresso, shops. And they would buy generally. This was in the city of Melbourne. They would buy ones that were run down, weren't well run, or dirty, and then clean them up and sell them for a massive profit.
Are they sharing that information, that idea to you, or are you just picking that up?
We were part of it. I mean, back then you had to, if they were going in to clean the cafe, the kids went too. Yeah, mum and dad certainly. I saw what they did and how hard they worked and how well it worked for them. I mean, we were considered very amongst our. I went to a Catholic school. Amongst the kids, we were considered like wealthy, super wealthy, which we weren't. We were just middle class. But they taught me that hard work. If you put the hard work in, generally things will work out for you. And I suppose that was when watching the surfboard. Then I went and did my university degree. I ended up in entertainment, and I started my very first job was with a large nightclub in Melbourne. And back in 1978, 79, nightclubs were not ubiquitous like they are now. Not every hotel on the corner was a nightclub or a glorified nightclub, because most of the hotels had to shut by 10 o'clock. So I got a job working for some very, very well-known, still well-known people. Solomon Lew owned part of the nightclub. That gave me the entry into hospitality through my own effort. Mum and dad were in hospitality, obviously, with cafes and so forth, and I worked in bars and picked up glasses when I was a kid. right throughout my younger years. I spent 3 years in that job, probably from the age of 18 to 21, 22. Had a wonderful time because there were only 3 nightclubs in the whole of Melbourne. So you had all of the A-type personality, or the A-listers, as we now know them, came there. And then I did a short stint with the Hilton Hotels in a corporate sense. Again, 22 years old. And what that taught me was Rob was not suited for corporate life, as simple as that. So whilst I was there, I had another idea, and this was, early 80s, that I could apply what I'd learnt in the big nightclub arenas. I could apply that to the teenage discotheques, which were largely run by police, and they were known as blue lights, which they still are today. So I went out and did some testing for a year in small halls to work out what they wanted, how to get the right mix. And then I think the following year, I took the leap of faith and went and hired a place that could hold 3,000 people, and went out there and we advertised to all the teenagers at the high schools that we had a particular band coming there, and Molly Meldrum came, Gavin Wood from down there as well, and we didn't. The only way you could advertise to teenagers then, because there was no social media, you had to go and put placards up on bus stops. Yeah, posters, like tape them up. So for weeks and weeks and weeks, I would go and put all I do all day long is work for the Hilton at night and go and put posters up and say, "This is come and do this." And our very first one, we had about 4,000 kids turn up.
Whoa.
And we went, wow. I remember sitting in the lounge room that we couldn't count the money that was coming in that fast. They were only paying $5 to come in. But, we had 4,000 at $5, $20,000, right? It's a lot of money. I remember we couldn't count it. We had it in bags and duffel bags, and we went back and sat in the lounge room and just tried to sort out all of the notes and the coins and so forth. And that led me into, 1 became 3. And then I ended up buying the roller skating rinks themselves that we were running them in, because roller skating rinks are a great big vast area if you think about it. And if you want to run entertainment in there, they're the perfect place. So in the end, after, I don't know, it was probably 25, and I owned 3 roller skating rinks and all of these nightclubs teenage discotheques, and it was going pretty well. And I sold it. Sold the whole lot and bought another house, an even better house in East Melbourne. And pretty much at 25, it was probably my first semi-retirement, which sounds ridiculous. But what does a 25-year-old do in 1985 with a whole bunch of money? Fortunately, I bought some property, but, go and buy an aeroplane. Yeah, sure, I'll buy an aeroplane. So these are the sort of things that we did, and that's what you gained out of an entrepreneurial life back then. Now, it's a little bit different now. I see when I work with some US universities and have for the last 20 years, and I see them advertising Bachelor of Entrepreneurship. It's like, what? And I took up one of the deans, Neely Bendapudi. She's a lovely lady. And I took her up on it one day about 10 years ago, and I said, Neely, you can't teach on being an entrepreneur. And she just started laughing, really, really laughing out loud. And she said, look, Rob, to be honest, it's just a fancy name for a business.
Degree.
Yeah. Right? That was my second round at 25.
I sort of feel like the difference between a business degree, or let's say a business mindset, a corporate mindset, versus an entrepreneur, or and doing the ventures that you just even talked about up until you're 25, there's a key element there that is different in my mind, and that's risk.
Yeah. You got it in one. Nailed it.
That's the ingredient that's missing from corporate compared to startups.
If you look up the word entrepreneur, it actually comes from the French, and I won't try and say it, but entrepreneur, I think something like that, comes from the word in French, and it was to risk all. That's what it was. To buy something for a known value and sell it, or hopefully sell it for an unknown value of greater value. And that's what entrepreneur comes from. So you nailed it in one.
So what is your relationship with risk? I have this sort of feeling that risk is relative, and risk it's in the eye of the beholder. Because if I said to you, cross your street at home, the blindfold on, go no problem. Because you can know that it's a cul-de-sac, you know that there's no
Yeah.
You know the factors, you know how it's 10 meters and it's fine. But effectively, I'm asking you to cross a road with a blindfold on.
Yeah.
But if I asked you to do that on the M1, you'd say that's too risky.
Yeah.
But if you knew there was no traffic, then you would do that. But to other people, without that information.
Yeah.
So what is your relationship with risk generally? How has that evolved over time?
Okay. Well, great question. And I guess it's become I've adapted as much as I've had brilliant successes. I've had brilliant failures as well, and lost millions of dollars because of that risk appetite. So, with regard to the specific question about how corporate life is and how they deal with risk, you're spot on. Insofar as even now with what I'm doing now in fintech, the fintech stuff we're doing with Securely is highly forward thinking and has been, but yet we deal with banks every day of the week. Okay, now there's not many more. There probably isn't a greater corporate life than
regulated as well.
Regulated, yeah, that's right. And so when we go to them and say, "This is what you could do," They sometimes they embrace it, and it happened recently. I won't mention the bank because we're dealing with banks all around the world, so we're having conversations all the time. And the head of fraud and scams, and this is a significant bank. This is not a small bank. Was absolutely in love with the solution. That's one of the solutions that Securely provides. And I was sitting there, and he was just raving about it in the meeting, and he had probably 5 or 6 or 8 analysts with him, or underlings, or whatever you want to call it. And I could just see in their eyes they were not thinking like he was.
Right.
I mean, he was actually saying, "Let's look. We'll get a large up front for you. We want to take this. We want to take this by ourselves exclusively. We don't want other banks to have it in the territory." And I'm just seeing that. The other guys were sitting at the table and also up on the Zoom, and they weren't embraced. And ultimately, they tempered the guy and tempered it back down again. And it's going to be a long, long time. But that guy was prepared to take the risk, right? And the reason he was prepared to take the risk, he was head of fraud and scams, is that he could see that there was an outcome for the customers, that it would be a positive outcome. However, all of the other risk-adverse people in his team pulled him back into line and turned it on its head. So we've got entrepreneurs that will give it a crack at any cost. I mean, the greatest one in the world at the moment, living one, is, of course, Musk. And we're sort of in that same territory. We're working in his territory. He came out 3 years ago when he bought Twitter and said, "I'm going to make sure every person on Twitter will have a bank account attached to their Twitter account or their X account now." Great thinking. But of course, don't forget that Musk was one of the first people with PayPal 25 years ago, right? And he got out of that, and that's where he got his initial money from. But he still hasn't been able to do it yet, right? And so we're working in that area. And in fact, we've got a patent in that area because we saw the same thing. If you can identify a profile of a social media profile and actually establish that they are who they are, in other words, what we call KYC, or know your customer, right? You can attach a bank account to it, right? And his idea is, and then of course he comes out the following day after he buys Twitter, and he stands on Twitter's, and you can see this on YouTube, he stands on Twitter's front steps and says, "I just paid $33 billion for Twitter yesterday, and today I found out that half of the profiles are fake." And that's what he said. And it was like, okay, you probably knew there were a lot of fake profiles, right? But guess what? I mean, 3 years later or 2 years later, he hasn't removed any of those fake profiles because they make him a lot of money. Risk is measured in a corporate life as in they don't want to take any risk on whatsoever. It's all got to be absolutely ticked off by everyone before they'll do anything at all. And that includes this morning I was travelling and listening to the ABC radio, and they're talking about banning under 16 years. That ban comes in, the social media ban for under 16-year-old people, children, comes in next week, I think. And they were talking about some of the complaints they were lodging with the social media platforms And then they were complaining about, well, it takes months for them to do anything. And that's just that corporate giant, right? So they're so risk adverse, they stand still, don't do anything at all. Entrepreneurs willing to risk it all. As I said, I've won and I've lost. A great one was I bought a newspaper off Rupert Murdoch. That should have been number one to tell
Red
me.
flag.
Yeah. Red flag. And I lost millions. Right? This is just 1998, probably, just before the Sydney Olympics. But you learn. And that's how you learn. You learn the hard way. But to us, in my mind, everything is a possibility. If I can look at something and say, well, why hasn't someone done it? I look at it from a point of view, well, let's look into it. Let's see why it hasn't been done. And there are some brilliant people out there. There's ideators and people, at the moment, we have a patent that we have purchased from a great ideator and an Australian guy. And the issue is, of course, idea is one thing, wrapping some IP around it that's defensible is another, but commercializing it is a whole nother, area of expertise. And certainly I would say entrepreneurs mostly, for the most part, are not the greatest people commercially speaking, because they will take that risk that you talk about and move it into the commercial arena, and that can be disastrous, really, really disastrous. So you really need good people around you is one of the things I've learned over the 50 years. And you need to listen to people. Even if it goes against everything you've come up with or you're thinking, you've got to listen to them and at least have that balance there. And that's the important part.
You're also a volunteer pilot for Angel Flight.
Yep.
That carries in itself its own sort of risk. Do you think there's a connection with the mindset in that space?
As a pilot, and I've been a pilot since I was, as I said before, 24 years of age, so a long time, 40-something years. I don't see it as risk. But the funny thing about it is I am absolutely petrified of heights. You can put me on a 10-story building and I am petrified looking over it. You can put me at 30,000 feet and I've got no problems.
Why?
It's to do with you left the ground seated, you feel comfortable with the airframe around you, you feel comfortable with your own skills, or even if you're
control?
No, it's the understanding of the dynamics that are involved, and that there's very, very little risk these days in the purpose of flight, both commercially and recreationally speaking.
But isn't that the same for a 100-foot structure?
It certainly is, but I don't think I can fall from an aeroplane.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm talking about even a ladder. I mean, we've got great big royal palms at our house, and we have to sometimes climb up, 30-foot ladders, and I can't do it. I get up halfway and I have to come down again. My wife will go running it up thing. But there again, Lisa would never try and fly an aeroplane as well. I don't see that the aeroplane dynamic as being dangerous at all. Of course it is, but I love the thrill and I fly what they call instrument rated as well. So it's not just flying in blue skies, you're flying in cloud, flying instrument approach. It's the same as a commercial aircraft does. And that to me is thrilling. That's really making my brain work so hard. Have I just about killed myself once or twice? Yep, I have. There's no doubt about it. It is dangerous, but if you make mistakes, and it's a human that makes the mistakes generally.
Hey team, just popping in to say thanks for listening. If you're enjoying the episode, please take a second to like or follow the show and share it with a friend. It's the best way to help us grow and keep bringing you more great content. All right, let's get back into it.
You don't necessarily come from a traditional fintech background. How did the idea for Securely come to be?
Great question. So I came out of animal health. We developed an animal health company from the Sunshine Coast and took it global, sold parts of it into a NASDAQ animal health company. Got out of that probably late, about 2017, thereabouts. And then I turned 60 in 2020, the year of COVID. And we sold all of our legacy manufacturing everywhere. We had nothing. We were completely out of business. But I had one more idea in my mind. And this is the problem with an entrepreneur. You have one more idea. And I kept talking about it and got to the point where I was explaining it to someone at a dinner party, and Lisa said, look, honestly, I've had enough of this. Can you either do something about it or shut up? Okay. And so the idea was this, that tradies and their customers have issues with payment and provision of services. So we know, you hear about it every day, where a tradie doesn't fulfill a job, right? And the customer's already paid all the money. Or the tradie does do the job and the customer then wants to barter down the amount to be paid or not pay at all. Okay, it's TikTok and YouTube there, it's all over it all the time. So the idea was back in 2020, well, why hasn't someone come up with a service just like Airbnb? Because if you think about it, Airbnb have a customer on one side and a house owner on one side and a customer on the other, and Airbnb hold the money in the middle.
Until after the transaction.
Correct, right? So, and the way their dispute resolution's brilliant. It's fantastic, and it gives comfort to both sides. The tradie would know the money is in the middle. The customer would know that the tradie can't get to the money until he finishes the job. Okay, so it was relatively what we thought very simple. And at the time, I was president of the Noosa Chamber of Commerce. And so I knew a lot of people up in Noosa, and Noosa, if not some things, is certainly full of well-heeled business people or ex-business people. A lot of A-type personalities, but you've got heads of this company and heads of that company that have retired up there. So an enormous amount of grey-haired wisdom up there. So I started talking to a couple of people that I knew, and I went to an app guy first of all, and Trevor. He's still with us now, and we love him to death. And I said, Trevor, I think I'd like to build an app just like Airbnb, but for tradies and their customers. He said, yep, we can do that. No worries. I think it might have been middle of 2020. He said, well, yep, we should have that up and running by Christmas. Oh, my God. Wow. So in that 6 months, we brought in other people, experts. We had the ex-head of IBM working with us, and they're all working for sweat equity, because the last thing I was going to do was pour millions and millions of dollars into $500,000 a year folks to provide services. So they were all given equity in the company. And anyway, you just don't understand how technically difficult it is to build a model of Airbnb, right? It's insane. In fact, I know this. I know the CEO of Airbnb in APAC, and I told her this story, Susan. I said, "Oh, we went and built it," and she just shook her head at me and went, "Rob, you did what?"
Yeah.
And I said, "We built," and she said, "We've got 1,500 developers that and you went and built the same thing." I said, "Here it is. It's on my phone. You can." And she said, "Well, all I've got to say is that's just unbelievable. That's fantastic." So that's where Securely started. We originally started as Securely the Tradies app. That's the idea. That was the idea. It was the journey, and it's how it is, and how we got to where we are now is what I call sliding doors. It's incredibly important to take the sliding door opportunity when it's in front of you. So we built that app finally after about a year, had a lot of learnings. And then when we had it up and running, and we found that some of the tradies' wives were using it to buy and sell items on this thing called Facebook Marketplace, which in 2021 was still not ubiquitous, right? And we went, what is this? And we had a look at it, and I think Marketplace was probably only operating in 16 territories back then, right? So they were still rolling it out. And now, of course, 63% of every classified sale in the world goes through Facebook Marketplace. It's dominant. But back then it wasn't. So we then went, okay, well, that's interesting. That's a great opportunity. But we didn't build the app for it. That app takes all sorts of contracts and, it has payment provisions in it. We'll build another one. So we thought we'd take the original app and then use it, and that was a bit of a disaster. So we built another app. And by this stage so this is specifically for buying and selling on marketplaces. Same provision. We would hold the money in the middle as a licensed remittance provider through the Australian government, and the person could send their bike or their dress or whatever it is, and know that the money won't go until the item turns up. So we did a soft launch probably in 2022, early 2022. in Southeast Queensland, just to stress test the actual back end. And we were noticed by Australian Payments Plus, or they're the ones that they're owned by the big bank, but they own Osco, they own BPay, they own FPOS, so all of the payment solutions. We were noticed by them, and we got a phone call and said, look, we love what you're doing, but you're sort of in our area. What the hell? Who are you? And so out of that was a sliding door, and we proceeded to meet them, and then we went into a contractual relationship with them quite quickly. Again, we're still a startup, and we're dealing now with technically a department of the largest banks in Australia. But what that gave us was this, another sliding door. That gave us the visibility into the back end of the payment system, okay? And so we could see, because we're under NDA and CDAs with them all, we could see everything that occurs in the back end, which we didn't know about. We were playing in this area, but we didn't really know what we were doing.
Did you realise it was more complex than you thought?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And especially in the last 5 years, the whole world's gone into this area of what they call open banking. So 5 years ago, you wouldn't have had GPay, you wouldn't have had Apple Pay 5 years ago. So this is part of the open banking rollout globally. So banks are opening up, okay, with what we can do and who you can filter in and out and so forth and how you pay.
A bit more entrepreneurial.
Yeah. I'm
not
not sure that's the word.
Not that far.
But a little open anyway, more open. It's called open banking. And but what it gave us the visibility, we saw in the end. And then I remember sitting in the boardroom. We've had one of the other important takeaways that I can certainly say to people is, if you've got an advisory board or if you've got a board, meet as often as you can, right? It's okay for you guys in the law firm here. You're walking past each other every day, but when you've got tech people there, they can be in different states. So we've met religiously every Saturday morning since the get-go. In fact, our very first 6 months of meetings were held in the Sunshine Beach Surf Club at 8 o'clock in the morning. As soon as they opened for breakfast, we'd barge in, we'd have breakfast, we'd have our board meeting, and that was before we had an office. Like, we were still all working from home. But yeah, listen to people. So we got to see what they were doing, and then we were working closely with them, rolling out one of their products on our site called Connect ID. And they're wonderful people. They're really, really terrific people at Auspay Plus. We were getting further and further down the track of, payments and how do we solve this problem? I mean, there is no payment facilitation on Facebook Marketplace. So if you're in Melbourne and I'm in Brisbane and I want to sell you an e-bike for $10,000, right now, at this very point, you have to work out who gets the 10 grand or who gets the e-bike, right? First. You can't, there's no real escrow system available. And that exists to this day, and that's globally, right? And back in 2023, we're looking at it and we're shuffling things around on the board on what we call a payment rail. And we went, hang on a second, are we looking at this the wrong way? Facebook's never going to validate or certify their profiles, right? They're not going to validate the profiles that are on the site because it's not in their interest to validate them. They want as many fake profiles as they can possibly get. And then we went, but hang on, we're looking at this the long way. What about if we let the banks validate a profile? So your banks have, all banks, as everyone would know, has what we call KYC, know your customer. So it's all your details. So you'll know that you'll have had to provide your bank your passport, your driver's license, probably a rates notice, maybe email, phone number, a whole lot of what they call KYC points. And so banks know who you are, right? And so we went, well, if the bank were to offer a payment solution to their customers, that could be interesting, right? And then we looked at it and went, golly, that's probably innovative. Has this been done before? So in other words, the bank could reach out to you, let's say you're with Bank ABC, and they would reach out to you. If they license our technology now, they'd reach out to you and say, would you like us, we've got a new product, would you like us to validate or certify your social media profiles, and we'll attach them to your bank account, just like all your other KYC. And once we do that, we'll then give you a wallet, a digital wallet, and you can buy and sell on any marketplace.
Have that escrow system in place.
Yeah. But back in 2023, and to this day right now, we're still leading the banks. It hasn't rolled out yet because there's, 44,000 banks around the world. So that's how innovative it was back then. And so we looked at it and went, Well, we better see. Surely some bank has thought of this. Globally speaking, someone must have thought of this. And we searched high and low, couldn't find anything. Then we went, well, someone must have patented it. Surely they must have patented it. And then we started an exhaustive patent search, and we started with probably 70,000 patents you'll be surprised how many payments patents there are out there, and I'll explain that to you later. But we started with 70,000, narrowed it down to, I think, 700, then further narrowed it down to about 80. And out of the 80, PayPal owned probably 70 of them, right? But none of them, we couldn't find one that matched what we were contemplating, this new idea of social media profiles being attached to a bank account and then providing wallets and so forth. And we went, what the heck? We'll go and put a patent in place. And I'd done a lot of patent work with a lawyer in Melbourne for over 2 decades. And he looked at it. Neil Murray is his name. And he looked at it and went, Rob, this is pretty spectacular what you're contemplating here. And I said, thanks, Neil, thinking he's just pumping my tyres up, right? And no, he said, I'm not joking. He said, I've seen thousands of patents in my life. This is really novel. I said, all right, well, let's see. So anyway, he rushed it through, and we put the patent in place. We put another patent in place for dating platforms based on the same scenario. This back in 2023, 2024 as well. And fast forward 2 years. And you got to sort of wait for the first 12 months in a patent. You have to wait. You can't really talk about it. You've just got to improve it, right? And then you get the chance at PCT to actually add further improvements to the previous patent application or provisional patent. And we got to that. We put the updates in. We put in everything with AI. Again, don't forget this was 2 years ago, so AI really wasn't on the horizon. I think ChatGPT 3 might have just been launched back in 2023. And so we added in a whole bunch of stuff, biometric stuff, everything that we could possibly find through our partners and other startups around the place. What we found was that, in fact, it was quite novel. And we had a patent examination come up earlier this year, and the examiner came back and said, oh, as per usual, we found 7 other patents that would meet prior art. And we went, okay. And I thought, well, you don't know what you don't know. And we looked through them all and went, hang on a second, this is not really in the same area. Bits and pieces of it are, but, like they were from Wells Fargo and JP Morgan. These are seriously well-heeled banks. I mean, JP Morgan's the biggest bank in the US. And so we thought we were a goner. But we started putting it through our own AI LLMs and saying, does it really match? And what we found was even if you put the whole 7 patents together, it didn't get anywhere near our orchestration, which was just like amazing. So they put it in patent words and wrote back to the examiner and said, here. And to our utter amazement, absolutely utter amazement, and I was on my way back from Germany where we just won an award in March this year, and he's rung me while I'm on the plane. And he said, are you sitting down? This is my patent attorney. He said, are you sitting down? I said, well, yeah, I'm on the plane. Don't.
You flying this?
Can't.
Not flying this.
And it was on Qatar Airways. And he said, the patent examiner has withdrawn all of the objections. You've got a clear run. There's nothing there. He's actually said it's novel, right? And which, of course, the other patent offices around the world have to look at as you go through your world stage.
International stage, yeah.
Your international stage. That's how securely got to from where we were in 2020 dealing with tradies to now dealing with essentially banks all around the world and some of the biggest financial institutions in the world. So going from animal health, which I spent my last 10 or 20 years in, into fintech, big step. But again, if you put good people around you, right, you'll generally be able to make it work. And what I've learned is one of the intriguing parts of it is, and quite often is with an entrepreneur, they see something other people don't, right? And that's certainly how I see things. But then they also, because they come from outside of that specific area, it's because I come from outside banking, from outside fintech, my mind's going, well, yeah, that's great, but why? Why aren't you doing it this way? That's how it sort of thinks. And then we realised that the dating industry was the same problem because, as you know, as your listeners would know, on dating sites, you don't know who you're talking to because they don't have any KYC whatsoever. They don't apply any know your customer requirements. As long as you've got a photo and a name and an email and a mobile, you can get on a dating site, and that's where all of the deceit comes into it. Not just at a loving level, but it allows the scammers to scam and it allows the catfishers to catfish, and it's a massive problem. And that is still occurring to this day right now. And so we've got another pattern in that area because we went, hang on, this fits in dating. And so the evolution of Securely has always been about the word, and we didn't know it at the start, to be honest. But Securely is it's a noun, right? It's a verb, but it's also an adjective, right? If it's used in the right way, and we use it as an adjective,
right?
So when people say, "Well, how did you get into fintech?" and the idea was to solve this problem, to make a secure transaction, but it just happened to be at the point where the world was changing the way it banks. Now, I said I'd just make a mention about that. I'm sorry to Bogart, you haven't been at ask me questions, but banking itself globally is changing massively. I would say, have you got kids?
5.
5 kids. Well done. Yeah. How old's the oldest?
Almost 12.
Wow. Okay, great stuff. So I would say your eldest child, or certainly your youngest child, but maybe your eldest as well, they won't be banking with Commonwealth or Westpac or so forth. But when it comes time to get bank accounts as adults, they'll be banking with Google or Apple or one of the big tech players.
That's terrifying.
Yeah. Well, it is and it isn't in two respects. It is. A lot of people say that because of the distrust in the social media area, right?
It's media.
Yeah. Right. But they're all moving towards it. So, for example, I was talking about PayPal's patents before. When we looked into it, PayPal have 3,500 patents in place and another 1,400 on the way. Google have 6,000 payment patents in place. It's very clear where these guys are going, where the tech platforms are going. They're moving to control payments. So they will probably, your kids will likely, once they're adults, start up bank accounts with Apple Pay, and there'll be an underlying bank there, but they won't really know they're there. They'll just see their online accounts, but you won't be going into a bricks and mortar bank and setting up the bank from there. But so the intersection of payments and tech companies is coming, and it's coming in a very, very big way. So what they call that, so those GPay and Apple Pay, they call them third-party payment service providers. And that's probably where Securely is going to go now. So from where we came in 2020 and our trip to how we got to where we are now and the defensible IP that we've got in place, so that first patent that we lodged, which is called Social Media Identity Securitization, so SMIS, that gives us the vertical for all classified and social media profiles or any profile provided by a tech player. You can then attach a bank account to, but we get that whole vertical. So we're in discussions right now with not just banks around the world for licensing our intellectual property and our patent and the use of it. We're actually in discussions about a Series B raise next year, being underwritten by some serious players from overseas, and they want us, the idea is now for us to build Securely. It'll be a third-party PSP. So where you have Stripe and you have GPay and you have all the other tech platform payment services, you'll then have Securely as well. Because technically speaking, we've got that whole vertical covered. So everything that's bought and sold online, right, apart from a business, of course, but bought and sold online peer-to-peer, we've got that covered. What does that mean? That means that there's, at the moment, Facebook Marketplace is doing around 20 billion transactions a year. It's massive, right? And there's no payment solution for them, right? They tried building Meta Pay a few years ago, and it was a disaster for Meta, absolute disaster. And I've got a couple of the ex-Meta Pay people on my advisory boards around the world, and so I know what happened behind it. But because they weren't from banking and they weren't focused on banking, they let all their KYC slip. And what they found was within months, the criminal organisations around the world were moving enormous amounts of money, and they couldn't control it. So they just went, it's not our key product, shut it down.
Yeah.
And that's what they did. So 20 billion transactions, to put that into perspective for your listeners, is PayPal did 24 billion transactions last year. And we've got a vertical with 20 billion in place, right? And we can build it out. So you can see why the money people are getting excited about it. So right now we've got people talking in London to various well-heeled people, and also in the GCC or the Gulf states as well. And that's probably where we'll end up with Securely. But at 65, I mean, I love it. I love where it's going and what it's doing. But at 65, you also get tired of sitting in front of a computer all day long and getting up and working at 4 o'clock to deal with the US and then having to deal with London at night time. So it's a bit tough for me. So we've got an office in the US at the moment, which we launched a couple of months ago. And we'll be launching one in London, and we'll be telling everyone about that shortly. It's not even been announced. But that's on the back of, I've got to give them a shout out if that's okay. I've got to give Austrade a shout out. You know, if you had have asked me 2 or 3 years ago what Austrade did, and I would have just, smirked and laughed and said, oh, it's just another government department, doesn't do anything. They are I cannot praise them high enough. And we've now dealt with Austrade in India, Austrade in San Francisco, Austrade in London, and there's another office, I can't remember what it is, but that's right, Singapore. In fact, it's next week. I'm going to the Singapore Fintech Festival as a delegate of Austrade. And they are just unbelievable. They're magical, what they do and how hard they work. It's sort of the complete opposite of how we see our government working, but gee whiz, the value to Australia, again, a shout out to them. And the other one we're dealing with is the Australian Export Finance Commission, or whatever they're called, or something like that. They're really good as well, very, very helpful. So, we don't really know what Securely is going to look like in 5 years. I'll be sitting on the board, but I will not be doing the day-to-day grind. You know, we touched on AI before, and, we can just look in the office now and look at the amount of work that goes through compared to 3 or 4 years ago. I remember using ChatGPT 3 for the first time, and none of my staff had any idea what it was. They were going, wow, okay. But now you're getting through, and it's certainly in your profession, it's also very important in your profession, but you're getting through about 3 times the workload you were getting through previously. So what would sit on my desk for a day normally, back 2 or 3 years ago, is gone in half an hour, and then you're moving on to other stuff. So the speed it is just quite extraordinary. But I love that part of it. But the old brain at 65 wants to spend more time in the garden.
What's the allure of fintech on the Sunshine Coast specifically? I feel like it's the culture here, or what is coming out of the coast region is quite remarkable. What do you put that down to?
Wherever I go, I say to people, and they smile and go, what is that? I say I'm from the Silicon Coast.
I love it.
Right? Yeah. And that is an initiative of some very great people down this end of the coast that had the idea, well, what can we do? How do we build, employment on the coast? What do we do? And they brought the undersea cable into Maroochydore, which is the highest speed cable available. And so people back then were saying, well, including the Sunshine Coast Council Business Development Department, and a great bunch of people, by the way, they said, well, fintech and tech itself is terrific. It has a small footprint. We don't need to build factories, right? We don't need, and then the factories need bigger roads for trucks. If you're doing tech, all you need is a cable coming in, a fibre coming into your building. You can do tech anywhere, and you can get a greater headcount than in factories. I mean, you need an enormous amount. So that's where it came from, well before I got involved in it. And I'm now helping them in every way I can. I think I have been invited to speak at. Every year they have a tech festival called Forward Fest in the Sunshine Coast Council area. I've been invited to be a keynote speaker in that next in 2026. But when you look at it, when people go, well, why? Because they don't know where you are, and you sort of say the Sunshine Coast, and then you say, oh, okay, well, Brisbane. And they go, oh, Brisbane. We know where Brisbane is, and that's what the US guys talk about it with. But why are you there? Well, why aren't? I mean, it's a magical place, and as long as we've got the highest speed internet available, we can do anything globally speaking. So that's the idea behind it. Certainly, the Sunshine Coast Council has embraced it. Moreton Bay Council, yes, they're very tech savvy down there and pushing for it. Noosa Council, less so, but it's a much smaller LGA. But having said that, the people up there in the business development department are quite supportive as well, but much smaller council compared to the Sunshine Coast Council. So why? Because it just makes sense. I mean, from the reef to the city and to the tech, it just makes sense for us to have tech here and not have the other footprints that are already aligned elsewhere.
I've read that in 2026, there may be a chance that Securely is listed on the NASDAQ.
Again, those are discussions that are going ahead right now. Yeah, they
what does that mean? What does that mean for you? What does that mean for the company?
Look, what does it mean for me? It means a whole lot more compliance. So not so
back to corporate.
Yeah, but certainly that gives the investors that are coming in now an exit. Let's face it, we're already 5 years in. We haven't taken any money until early this year, and that was we only took outside money in a Series A once we knew the first patent had IP defensibility around it. We were not keen on taking any outside money until we knew there was an asset.
Yes, of course.
Right? Because if that had been shot down, it's kaput. You know, we've got other stuff, but would we go to the NASDAQ? Look, quite possibly. We have had discussions with a Chinese consortium earlier this year. They were going to do what they call a SPAC, SPAC, which is sort of a backdoor listing in through the NASDAQ. The company's already built. It's funded, so there might be companies sitting there with $100 million sitting there, but there's no business attached to it, just sitting there. Then what they do is they back in the business into that and then formalise it by taking further listing requirements. So we went through all of that, and having been involved with public companies by way of a shareholder through my business career, the compliance is just a disaster. So I wouldn't be pushing for it. I have made it very, very clear in the discussions that are going on right now. My wife and I still own the vast majority of this company, along with our team that started with us. They've got smaller amounts of equity involved. We're prepared to sell down a little bit, but we want to see it through. We think Securely can be something special. And what does that mean? Are we another Yui? I hope so. You know, Yui started here with 6 people that turned up here 20 years ago from South Africa, and look at them now. They're employing thousands, both in different headquarters. And that's what I'd like to leave behind for where we live, why we live where we live, for our kids. But yeah, that's for other people to take forward with us. It doesn't really matter to us. The company already has an intrinsic value of over $1 billion, right? When you look at the IP that we've got. In fact, we've got 3 lots of IP that you could intrinsically value at $1 billion each. No problems at all. Getting that to commercial reality is a different story. That's a whole nother discussion. But the people that are investing in the Series B next year, and again, we haven't announced it, but we're talking about it loosely, they're really well-money people, and they would want to see some sort of exit, a public exit, where they can materially. Yeah. Yep. Look, it's there. I'll take advice on it as we move forward. And we do have some great people around the world providing advice. We've been really, really again, sliding doors. You know, I'll tell you a quick story. If I got time, but last year I was invited to the US Fintech Awards in November last year, in fact, in New York. And we'd been put up for Best Fintech Innovation. And of course, so I trundle over there. You know, you don't expect anything in New York to take. You don't, as an Australian, you don't expect to bring home a trophy. Well, I think the last one that took someone out of the US was Alan Bond with the with the yachting trophy, with the America's Cup. But I'm sitting over there in New York on West 57th in a big ballroom, and I'm at the table of the mixed table, the table that doesn't have 10 people, the non-corporate table. And I'm sitting next to a guy called Stu Schwartz, and I didn't know him, and his wife, lovely wife, Erica. And anyway, we're chatting away, and I said, "What are you?" And he said, "Oh, I do KYC, and we do really, really advanced, know your customer stuff, deep dive stuff." but he didn't give away anything about what company he was with or what position he held. And we were just chatting away, and I honestly never had any thought that we would take away a trophy. So I had a few red wines with Stu, right? A lovely guy, really, really lovely guy. We're chatting away, and then to our utter dismay, they call out the 8 finalists, and then they call securely from Australia. And it's like, oh my God, I'm not prepared for this. Not only I'm not prepared, but I'm also a little bit tipsy. So I had to be very careful. But as it turned out, about 2 or 3 months ago, we announced that we had set up a US office, and we'd set up Securely Corp, a US corporation, a C Corp. And Stu reached out and said, Rob, can we catch up next week? I said, yeah, sure, absolutely. We'd touch base a couple of times during the year. It's like you meet people at conferences and you sort of touch base and you help where you can. Anyway, he gets on the Teams and he says, Rob, we couldn't really deal with you until you were actually a US company. He said, now I want to tell you what I do and where I'm from. Anyway, as it turns out, Stu is a department head of a company that has $16 trillion under management. Now that's T with a T, not a B.
Yeah.
Right, $16 trillion. So to put that in perspective for your listeners, Australia has a GDP of $1.9 trillion, right? So 16 trillion in one company. And the reason why they have that is because they pretty much they started 401ks or superannuation post-war. So they basically have taken all of that money over those years, and that's why they've got that much under management. But still a family-owned company, not listed. Owned by the same family that started it post-war, right? And the granddaughter now runs it. She's got a value of about 80 billion by herself, just one of the family members. And he said, we really love what you're doing, Rob. And
of all people to sit next to, at a board,
it's just astonishing.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm with so and so, and this is what we do, and we've got other labs, and we want to talk to you because what you've got is pretty special. But we couldn't talk to you when you were just an Australian company. We have a mandate not to invest in companies outside. Yeah. So you just don't know who you're sitting next to. To see where that's going right now, they're very interested in the dating pattern because, again, it securitizes the profile. And if you think about this in a sense that you've got all of these people on Facebook, there's 6 billion people on Facebook, thereabouts. In India, 440 million in India alone. So think about it in terms of Australia. But you've got 6 billion people sharing what they do on the weekend, what they do as a hobby, where they go. Think about the information that's as part of that, right? And no one's tapping it apart from, of course, the tech companies, right, who are using for advertising. But take it another step. Imagine if an insurance company had access to all of their insured's social media profiles. You could then work out the risk element of what the person does on the weekends, right? Does he go rock climbing? Right? Is he a motor car?
Does he fly planes?
Yeah, motor car racer.
Yeah,
fly planes, things like that. So the use of what we've done, what we put together, has other uses as well outside of the patents that we've got in place at the moment. So we've got an insurance patent coming too, as well, by the way, just before anyone rushes to do it. Yeah, that was Stu, and so we're dealing with. I mean, we're probably the only Australian company dealing with a $16 trillion company anywhere in the world.
Incredible.
And it's wonderful. It's really, really nice. There's some lovely people out there. That's just fantastic.
So for 50 years of experience in this game, what would be one piece of advice you'd give to a budding young entrepreneur looking to do something?
It's really simple. Just do it. Do the Nike thing. Just do it. Yep. Don't get left wondering.
Rob, final 5 questions. I appreciate your time this morning. What does success mean to you?
The betterment of mankind.
I love that. What does happiness mean to you?
Family.
What does your normal day look like?
4 o'clock starts, midday in the garden.
Working till midday?
Yeah.
Okay. Coffee or breakfast?
Generally a Bircher muesli cup that my wife makes, and I take it out of the fridge.
I love that.
And a homemade muffin, and we have a really good coffee machine in our office. I mean, an extraordinary one.
If there was a piece of advice you'd give to your younger self that would be put on a billboard for the world to see, what would that piece of advice be?
Buy property.
Good advice. And a guest that you think would be a great person to have on the show?
There's a couple up here on the coast. Obvious. Well, have you had CJ? Have you had
No, I haven't had
Craig
CJ yet.
Josikin?
No.
You got to get him in. He is a wonderful human, a visionary, and he's behind all of the Silicon Coast stuff. I mean, and he just works and works and works. So I would get CJ in, and he'll chat your arm off. Honestly, he can talk and talk. He's the king of the selfies. He's fantastic. And look, I came across him. He runs Forward Fest, so it'd be great. And Forward Fest has grown and grown and grown. And what I loved at Forward Fest last year was not just the business people that were there and Rosanna Natoli and all of those people that were there, but he had so many school children coming through. There were busloads of them coming through. And for them to have access to the stuff I never had access to, that back in my day, back in the 70s and 80s, no one had access to, was fantastic. So these kids are coming in buses and mixing with entrepreneurs, mixing with visionaries, right? And that's why I think what Craig does and what the Silicon Coast people do is fabulous, yeah.
Rob, Neely, this has been a great chat. I really appreciate it. And from flipping surfboards to securely, like it's very obvious to me that you have learnt the compound effect of your knowledge and experience has brought you to this juggernaut that you are here now. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing from afar the growth and the up and up that Securely will no doubt achieve. So
that's very kind words. I really appreciate it. And the other thing I'm doing a lot now is mentoring. And honestly, if people just reach out, I've got no problem. I've probably got 5 or 6 startup people I'm mentoring at the moment, and really happy to do it.
No,
so if they're not sure, if your listeners are not sure about anything, I'm happy to provide advice.
That's very kind.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Rob.
No worries. Thanks.
Cheers.